R&D that's required, to your point. And so navigating that, I mean, to switch themes a little bit, I'd love to think about another topic, which is less around store fees and installation rights, but more around the rights of the user. I think I often like to tell people that we can skip the buzzword, the metaverse, and just take a look at what seems to me to be an inexorable shift, which is more time, labor, leisure, spend, wealth, fun in virtual worlds, much like the past several decades have shown that same shift to online environments than to smartphones. But in this instance, it's more about existence. That's your idea of the embodied internet, about being within the internet rather than just having the internet at your fingertips. That in turn means that many of today's societal challenges online become harder. Data rights, your ownership of your data, security, misinformation. I think this is one of the big reasons why the Web3 and blockchain movement is so inspired today. Which is to say, yesterday you had mentioned privacy, the need for new governance models, new safety services to be built from day one. Can you walk through how you think through those decisions, given how early we are in the metaverse, given how some of the behaviors that will stem from the metaverse are yet to be seen, and even the economic models seem early? How do you walk through those decisions?
Yeah, I think that this is a really important set of topics, and there are important tensions in them. So when we're talking about interoperability, I think one of the basic ideas is I don't just think that there's going to be one system for entitlements or how you structure ownership of digital goods or NFTs. It would be hard to just design a system, especially because the metaverse isn't a thing that any company owns. It's just, it's something that we're building for. There are going to be multiple different systems around entitlements and ownership. So some of them will be based off of crypto or NFTs or decentralized. Some of them will be centralized in different ways. And I think part of the art and the challenge of what we're going to need to do is make it so that these different systems that have somewhat different philosophies can still all be incorporated into coherent user experiences. Because I just don't think it's going to be the case that, I'm sure a bunch of people are going to try building centralized things, and a bunch of people are going to try doing decentralized things. And as with every other generation of technology, it's not clear that all one is going to win out. I think there's virtues of both, and you want to build systems where those things can work. But I mean, as you're saying, if you take any of the different social equities that I think we've had to explore in quite a bit of depth over the last 5 or 6 years, especially in our social media apps, there are the real trade-offs depending on how you design those systems. And I'm not sure exactly which way people are going to gravitate towards. I mean, for some of the things that you're talking about, like safety, for example, I just think that that's incredibly fundamental to any kind of social system in the metaverse, because the feeling of presence that you have with people, it is so powerful, right? It is such a different feeling and sensation than anything that technology can deliver today on our 2D screens, right? It's like, I mean, we're on Zoom calls. It's great. I'm so glad that existed over the last couple of years, but I don't think anyone's under the illusion that you feel like you're together. Just as soon as you can get back and actually sit with people in person, it's just like, wow, there's something that's very different about this. But virtual and augmented reality come a lot closer to that feeling of presence, which I think also means that if someone is doing something that is abusive in that space, that can also be a lot more troubling. But we also have tools and things that we can enable in that environment that are different and in some ways more powerful than what you'd even have in the physical world. So, we're building into Horizon from the beginning, for example, the ability to block anyone easily, so they just disappear from your experience, right? I mean, that's not a thing that you can do in the physical world, or you can just have someone disappear if they're bothering you and not show up at all. Now, there are interesting questions there, because I mean, what if you're in a work meeting and you've made someone disappear and you can't hear them, but like the other, there's context going on around. None of these things are foolproof, but I think that there are some primitives like block that I just think are actually very critical to build into the system from the beginning. So that's sort of an example of something that, I think drawing upon some of the lessons that we've had over the last 5 years, we put a lot of energy into this from the beginning. We did a bunch of research around what matters the most to people, and we've built some of those primitives in up front. So now, when you're, there are a bunch of other challenges like this too. I mean, you're talking about intellectual property issues, and that's going to be a big question around digital goods. Whereas, on the one hand, there are a bunch of luxury goods companies that are already designing digital clothing for avatars and want to sell it, but they want to make sure that there aren't knockoffs, right? So, one of the things that we found is, okay, well, if something is on a blockchain and there's no real governance around that, and someone can just make a knockoff, Gucci sweater, then I don't think Gucci is going to feel that good about being in that space, right, or participating in that system. So I do think there has to be a balance where you can both give people the freedom to do all the things that they want, while also ensuring that it's a lawful place, and that the intellectual property of people and companies that have spent a long time cultivating that can be honored too. So a lot of questions, but I think that there are going to have to be a bunch of different models that can all be made to work together. And my hope, at least for the work that we do, is to not enforce that, okay, there's just going to be, here's the solution that we think is the right one, and like that's going to be the only thing we support. I think we're going to want to basically create room for different models to exist, and probably coexist over time, or at a minimum kind of give some space to see what naturally emerges as the most useful set of things.
Yeah, I think that's right. One of the questions that I get most frequently, and I think was something that you worked to address yesterday in the keynote, is this question of, okay, so if the metaverse isn't here now, what does it look like when it is? And people usually say 2030, 2035. And I think what's interesting about that is, if you asked someone in 1995 or 2000, 2005, what does a day in the life of 2021 look like? It's probably going to have some open platitudes, like more people online more often from more devices. But any effort to actually predict the nature of usage, and often the software, would have fallen short. There was nothing that would lead you to the potency of the story format, to TikTok's dominance of the billboard charts, to YOLO options trading on Robinhood while you're riding the subway, saving AMC from bankruptcy. And I think many of the other behaviors that have emerged are equally hard to predict. And I think that's because what's inspiring about these big technological shifts, which I would say we've had 2 in 40 years, the internet and personal computing,